Good evening, everybody. First of all, I must say thank you for inviting me along to share with me my life in the workroom. Now, I'm going to divide my talk into three: where I worked, how the workroom was run, and some of our customers. Now, you'll appreciate I cannot tell you a lot about the royalty because a lot of them are still alive, and we were all sworn to secrecy. Now, I started work in 1946, a long time ago, when I was 15 years old. Now, I always wanted to sew, but my parents weren't very happy about it. But when my mother realised that is what I wanted to do, she said, "You are going to learn properly." So that's how I came to spend my apprenticeship at Worth's in Grosvenor Square. Now, Worth was a very lovely building. It was very, very fortunate. It wasn't bombed in the war, but it just lost a few windows. But long before the war, it was the Romanian embassy. So you can imagine it was very, very beautiful. Now, if you imagine that you are a very, very wealthy lady and you come to Worth for all your clothes to be made, whether it's evening dresses, day dresses, suits, whatever. Now, in the post this morning, you have had an invitation. Now, it could be to Buckingham Palace for a ball, or it could be to the Royal Enclosure at Ascot. I'll leave you to decide where you're going. Like every lady, when you have an invitation to go somewhere, you've got nothing to wear. So you will ring up Worth and make an appointment to come. Now, when you arrive in your chauffeur-driven car, behind the door of Worth would be a porter. Now, he has been told that you're going to arrive, say, about 2 o'clock. So in the door, there's a little spy hole. So round about 2, he's standing there looking through this little keyhole to see when you arrive. So when you do come, and your chauffeur-driven car, and the chauffeur lets you out and you walk up the steps, immediately the front door is opened. Because remember, you're a very wealthy lady and you don't hang around. You will enter in a magnificent hall, black and white marble floor. All round the walls is oak panelling, and a beautiful marble fireplace, and in front of you a lovely staircase of white marble with red carpet on and wrought iron balustrades, and you will go up those stairs. Now, when you get to the top of the stairs, you will enter the salon. When it was the embassy, it was the ballroom. Again, it had panelling around the walls, but this time it had mirrors, because as you can imagine, when it was a ballroom, it had to be very glitzy. If you looked up to the ceiling, a magnificent ceiling, and it had all cherubs and shells and angels and clouds and everything, and in the centre, a wonderful chandelier. Now, on the floor, it had a cream colour carpet, and round the edge, it had settees that were all upholstered in cream satin and all gilded. Now, that is where you would sit. Now, when you come up to the top of the stairs, if you look to your right-hand side, you would have seen what we would call like an invisible door. You know when you go to National Trust properties and you look as if someone has got a knife and cut round the wood panelling, you would have seen one of those doors. Now, if you were able and you went through that door, you would come to another staircase and another landing. And if you went up those stairs, you would come to the bedrooms, and that is where the workrooms were. They were like the dressmaking workrooms. If you'd have gone up another flight of stairs, you would have come to the tailoring department, and if you went up to the attic, you would have come to the farriers and the milliners. Now, I will bring you down again into the workroom. Now, the workroom I was in was as long as this room, but a little bit wider, and it must have been the ambassador's bedroom because it was beautiful. Again, it had all panelling around the walls. This time they were in a beautiful, like peppermint green. And all round the edge of the panelling was all picked out in gold. The ceiling was like a wedding cake, and again we had a lovely marble fireplace. Now, it was an ensuite room, but as workroom girls, we were never allowed to use it. If we wanted to spend a penny, we had to go down 3 flights of stairs to the basement. Now, again, when it was the ambassador's bedroom, he must have had a wonderful carpet on the floor, but we had bare boards. Now, the boards were the old-fashioned ones that were about 9 inches wide, and as you can imagine, through the years, they had shrunk a little bit. So whenever we dropped any pins, 9 times out of 10, they went down the floorboards. Now, in the room, we had 3 windows, 3 sash windows, about this size, and we worked on trestle tables, the old-fashioned trestle tables, and then we had 1 table under each window, and then there was their fitter had a table that went the other way round. Now, her table was a lot higher than ours because when she sat there, she could see exactly what was going on. Now, we had to have on the table, we had brown paper. Now, remember, it was 1946, 47, around that time, and paper was still very short after the war. So if we thought our brown paper was a little bit, shall I say, sad, we'd have to ask the fitter, saying that we think we need new paper on the table. She would come and have a look. If she thought it could be turned over and turned round, so it had to be, so it lasted us a little bit longer. Now, we had to supply our own needles, our own thimbles, our own tape measures, and our own scissors. The firm supplied the pens. Now, you know the little blue boxes of pins you can buy today? We had one of those, and it had to last us a year. We had to wear white overalls, and we sat on wooden chairs, straight back chairs. We were allowed to bring a cushion from home, but we were never allowed to bring a cushion for our backs, because if we were leaning back, you're not working. So you can see it was quite strict. Now, I'll tell you the order of pecking order, shall I say. Now, the fitter was the boss. She was in charge of the workroom, she was in charge of the girls and the customers. Now, really, she had shall I say, not a very good job in actual fact, because she had to keep the girls in the workroom very happy, and she had to keep the customers very happy. So it was quite an unenviable job. So she was the boss. Then under her was what we called, and we never did find out why she was called, a second. So if the fitter was down in the showroom fitting the customers, some of our customers didn't come in, the fitter had to go to them to be fitted. Then if you had a query, you would go to the second, and she would tell you what to do, what not to do. Then came the hands. Now, they were girls that had been in the workroom for many, many years, and they really did know their job. Then under them came the assistant. Now, she could be a girl that had been to a trade school or come up the step of a ladder from being an apprentice. Then you come to the apprentices. Now, their job was really to, shall I say, although they were there to learn the trade, they were also there to run around. Now, each hand had their own customers. So every morning, the apprentice had to go round to each hand to find out if she needed any notions. Now, we had a notebook and a pencil, not a pen, a pencil. And you had to go round to each hand to find out if she wanted any notions. And that meant if she was given a dress the day before, it was Silco's, Petersham's. You would know it as seam binding. We knew it as lute and press studs, hooks and eyes. And if it's a dress that was going to have shoulder pads, it would be canvas and wadding, not cotton wool, wadding. So you had to go round to all the girls, and when you wrote it all down in your little book, remember things were still on coupons, and so you had a little piece of material the size of a postage stamp to go down to match the Silco up, and row beside you if you lost that piece of material. So you went down to the stockroom, and that was another little world down there. And then you said, when it was your turn to be served, you said to the assistant down there, I'm from so-and-so workroom. And she would say yes. Behind her, she had a pigeonhole with all the dockets in. So she'd get all the dockets, and you'd say, I'd like the notions for the Duchess of somebody or Lady somebody else, or the Right Honourable, whatever. And everything that you had, she wrote down on the docket. So you could never go back 2 days later and say, can I have a seal code for Lady so-and-so? Because she'd say, you've had it. Then you went back to the workroom and gave out all the seal codes and everything for the girls. And then you would ask them if they wanted anything, because if the girls were copying a dress that was like a model, spring or autumn collection, and if they wanted to check on something, you had to go down to the showroom and borrow it. Now, you had to ring down to say, was that dress free? And if it was, and if there was customers in the workroom, you were never allowed into the showroom. You were never allowed. You were met at the door. You had to take a sheet down so everything was covered up, and you had to sign for that dress so that nothing would ever go missing. Then when the hand had finished with that dress, you took it back to the showroom, and then you came back to the workroom, and if nobody wanted anything else, you sat with your hand. Now, when you started work as an apprentice, you were given a hand to work with. Now, like everything else, sometimes you get on with people, sometimes you don't. Now, I was very fortunate. I got on with my hand. She was very strict, but I did get on with her very well. Then you sit down, as you haven't got anything else to do, and you start to learn your trade. And the first thing you learn to do is to oversew. Then after you've sort of mastered oversewing, then you have every dress, even if it's a dress that has not got a waist to it, every dress had a petersham. Now, the petershams today, you know, are made of polyester and what have you, and you can't even get your needle in them. But ours were grosgrain. And you'll find every yard of petersham, you had to dip it in water because it always shrunk for 3 inches. So if ever you buy a skirt, say a cotton skirt, and it's got a band on it, and you wash it, and you try it on, and you think, I didn't think I'd put that amount of weight on. Remember, the petersham's probably shrunk. So you would have to learn to do that. Now, although people can stand up very, very straight, they always go in a little bit at the back. So we had to put in 3 little tiny darts. And then you had to do a little hem either end of the petersham, and you had to buttonhole stitch everything on. Now, when you start to learn things like that, and if the hand that you're working with, if the customer's coming in and the dress goes down to be fitted, you can't sit back and think, great, fitting, 10 minutes rest. Oh no, you're given little jobs to do. And one is now today, we have foam rubber in our shoulder pads. My time, we didn't. We had to make them. And you make them with canvas and wadding, and it depends, because some people, if they're sporty people, they're not straight. They're a little bit lopsided. So sometimes we had to make a pad 1 inch bigger than the other side to make the customer look absolutely straight. So you have this canvas, it's like a little triangle, and then you cut out all the wadding, and then you have to mitre it so that it's all nice and smooth, and you have to learn how to cover them. Now, another thing we used to have to do, today I think they would be called bust enhancers. In our time we called them falsies, because not everybody has a lovely figure. So if you we had to get a very small circle, like a very small saucer, you cut it out in canvas, you do 4 notches so that you fold them over, then you have to pad them all with the cotton wool, the wadding, beg your pardon, and then we used to say, what God's forgotten, you stuff with cotton. And you had to learn how to cover them so that when they're under a dress, that they don't show at all. Another thing we had to learn again, and that was to do rouleau, you know, the little loops. Now, chiffon is wonderful to make those, but anything else can be a little bit of a nightmare. Now, we had some lovely customers and we had some shockers, as you can imagine. Some customers thought because they had money that they owned you, but others could be really delightful. Now, just after the war, some of our customers were beginning to travel, and a lot of them went to Switzerland. And as you know, Switzerland was a neutral country, and so, of course, they still had a very good supply of materials. And Swiss lace, I expect you've all heard of Swiss lace, and that was really lovely. Now, we had one customer, and she had bought some, it was a time of taffeta in, 1946, 47, 48, 49, and she bought some taffeta in. Now, they didn't have to, the customers didn't have to have our material. They could bring their own material in. And she bought this material. It was very lovely. It was little checks, inch square checks, and they were green and red, yellow, white and blue. And she insisted that every check was stitched in its right colour. So you could imagine she had an evening dress, so you can imagine how many ends we had to sew off. But she was paying for it, she was our customer, so she had what she wanted. Now, if we made a lace dress, instead of having seams, the lace was laid over the top, and we had to buttonhole stitch it all round, and then all the surplus lace was all cut away. So when you looked at somebody with a lace top, you couldn't really see where the seams were. Now, do any of you remember Maytime in Mayfair? The film with Michael Wilding and Anna Neagle? Well, we made all the dresses for that, and that was quite, it's quite exciting. We always knew, what people were doing and what people, where they were going, because they would come in and we would, sort of make their dresses for them. Do any of you remember when Anne Todd, I don't know if any of you remember Anne Todd? No. Well, we made her a dress, a white grosgrain dress, and it was off-centre, it was done up down the back, very tight, very slinky, and it was off-centre, done up down the back, and she had Diamante buttons on. Now, this was about 1950, and those buttons cost £1.05 each, and that was my week's wages. So as I'm sewing the buttons on, she had 7 buttons down the back, and I'm thinking that's 1 week's wages, 2 weeks' wages, 3 weeks' wages. Because I don't think I told you, but I started off at £1.2 and 6 a week. And when we had rises, we either had rises of ½ a crown, or if you felt as if you'd really made it, you had 5 shillings. But none of us were ever discontented. We always had a lovely, a feeling of satisfaction. Now, I can tell you about this royal lady because she's no longer with us, and this was Princess Marina, Duchess of Kent. Now, she was given, all I can say is, like a giant bedspread, and it was the most beautiful blue, like a summer's day sky, and all round the edge she had about a 9-inch border, and it was all done in gold threads, and in the corners, Paisley design has a little twirl, and that had diamonds in it, and every night that had to go in the safe. Now, she wanted a housecoat made of it, so it had to be designed for her, so she had the bands down the front, and she had bell sleeves, these big sleeves, so she had the border on the sleeves. On the shoulder, she had like a little gold clasp, and she had a little tab underneath, so that if she didn't want the sleeves long, she could gather them up and hook them up. But down the front, she had 84 buttons and loops, and she insisted that every button and loop undid. So you can imagine how long it took us to do them. But it was a lovely garment when it was finished. It really was very, very nice. Now we made for Lady Billy Butlin, and again, perhaps I can tell you this, Lady Billy Butlin and Princess Alexandra, they were going to a charity ball at the Grosvenor House Hotel. Now, had all our customers, and all our customers have what we would call, like, I don't know again why they couldn't name this, and that was a sales assistant. And that is, I think now they'd be called personal shoppers, I don't know. And so when you arrived, you had this lady to greet you, and she knew all your little whims and what have you. Now, she would have perhaps 2 or 3 ladies to look after, but no way could she say, well, you can't have that dress because Lady so-and-so's having it. No way, everything was secret. And it turned out that Lady Billy Butlin and Princess Alexandra were having the same style dress. But nobody, obviously, could say to them, well, you can't have that because so-and-so's having it. But luckily enough, they had the different colour materials. One was in red and one was in green. And of course, being in the workroom, we used to think, whatever's going to happen when they meet? Because going to the same ball, obviously you're going to see. But luckily enough, Lady Billy Butlin noticed this. And she went up to Princess Alexandra and she said, I see we've both got good taste. And so it was fine, nothing happened. But some of our customers had been with us for many, many years. And of course, if they're satisfied and happy with what shall I say, we produce for them, obviously they bring their friends along. So, of course, no way can you upset a customer, because if you upset her, she would take all her friends away to go, obviously somewhere else. So you had to, even if the customer wasn't very nice, you still had to be very, very polite and very nice to them. Any of you been to a society wedding? Well, we made for Lady Guinness's daughter, Ingrid. She was a very, very nice girl. She was very tall, very slim, very nice looking. Now, she was going to have a veil of her grandma's, and so she had a length of material. It was satin to match the veil, because obviously after a few years the veil had got a little bit creamy. So she had a dress, and it was very, very all tucked right down, and it was the time of the long tight sleeves and the train. And Lady Guinness, she was a lovely lady, but I should imagine that if ever she organised a charity, she would know who didn't turn up. Because she was, as I said, nice lady, but one of those ladies. So when the wedding dress was finished and the wedding was coming up, she insisted that the 3 girls that made the wedding dress would go to the church to straighten the bride out. So, of course, the day came. She got married in Spanish Place, St James's Spanish Place, just behind Harrods. And so, of course, you can picture 3 workroom girls, can't you, at a society wedding. We were allowed to go by taxi, but we had to come back by bus, and we lost our lunchtime. So we arrived, and the wedding was about 12 o'clock, and of course we stood right at the side, and of course all the guests are arriving. They're all coming in their chauffeur-driven cars, and they've all got long dresses on, mink coats, you name it, they'd got it on. And so they're all going in. All of a sudden, Lady Guinness arrives.